This is a great question. How involved can or should I be in the finances of my grown kids? I have a couple of college kids living at home, soon to be graduated. I want to help with advice, but I don't want to overstep or overreach.
Yeah.
Such a good question.
Financial parenting doesn't stop when your kids become adults. And it's really, really easy for us to cause unintended harm through being overly generous to our kids and not allowing them to experience the negative consequences of financial choices. There are different phases within your relationship with your kids based on their age and their stage of life. So when they're 12 years old, right, they're in your house, you can control a certain amount of their financial choices. You can control it because you control the spigot, right? They're not working a job. When they start working a job, maybe they're a mid-upper teenager. This is why allowances are so important for younger kids. You start training them with how to use small resources because if they're faithful with little, they'll be faithful with more. So now they're teenagers, they're making more money, they're learning how to be generous and give and save, and they're doing more of that with the resources that they've been entrusted with. And then we step into the years where they're in college and saving for the future. Maybe they're going to be living at home. This is where I want to be very, very careful about giving blanket advice that everyone should apply universally, because it's certainly not the case, because not every child is the same. I've got some people who have children at home, who have graduated from college, who are working diligently, who are saving aggressively to get a down payment on a home, to buy a place, to get out on their own, or maybe to pay off debts or student loans. Okay, I'm okay with that as long as they're productive members of society and productive members of a household.
Amen.
I think this is really, really important. If, however, they're staying home and they're not working hard, they're disruptive to the family, and they're not saving for the future, their spending decisions are just like, what on earth are you thinking? Here's a question. Are you harming them by allowing them to stay in your home, charging or maybe not even charging them rent? Allowing them to stay here and to not face the realities of their financial lives. One of the reasons sociologists recognize that individuals who are 30 are many years behind people maybe 20 years younger or older than them, 20 years in the past, would have already accomplished so many life cycles and life goals than individuals who are in the 30s now. Many of them are just now thinking about getting married, just now thinking about having kids. They're just now hoping to be able to think about saving for a home. And Tyler, I know in your circumstance, you're above the curve relative to your peers, but you're also behind the curve relative to people in my age demographic. And that's not a judgment on you or judgment on the culture. That's just reflection of reality. So I think part of what that reality also reflects, and this, I'm not saying anything about your parents, Tyler, because I actually know your parents, they're great, godly people. But there are ways in which we as parents, through our parenting style and culture, through our cultural norms and expectations, cause unintended harm by not allowing our children to step into responsibility sooner. Yeah. We allow our children to be adolescents longer. Right. It wasn't an option for me. I moved out of the house at 18 into college. I never moved home. I came home, summers and Christmas. For 3 years. And then I got married in between junior and senior year of college. For me, it was a very different world. And I had to step into figuring out how to make it work. I had to go to school full-time and work 3 part-time jobs. My wife had already graduated. She was working full-time and another 1 to 2 part-time jobs. We made it work. I think we made $20,000, $25,000 that first year. We didn't make a lot of money. But that forced me to grow up. And it was hard, but it was formative. And here's the question. Are we allowing our kids to have those formative experiences, or are we sheltering them from those formative experiences? So that's a question. Okay. I'm not telling you what you need to do with your kid. I just think like, hold on. Is what you're doing really helping them or is it hindering them? And I think it all depends on the child and their response. If I've got a responsible child working a diligent job, saving aggressively for retirement, being a productive member of the household, I'm going to bend over backwards to help that child. I'm happy to, allow them to stay in the home. I still want to charge them rent. I think that's wise. But I want them to start growing in those responsibilities. But I also want them to pay off that and get their situation right, because homes are not what it cost when I first bought a home or when my parents first bought a home, right? It's a very different world we're stepping into.
Yeah.
So all that's step one. But if they're not productive members of the household, if they're disruptive, if they're making bad financial choices, not under my roof. So this is where it's scary and say, you've got to find a different place. You can't stay here because this is harming you and not helping you. So that's the housing discussion. And we have to be kind of intentional with how we step into that. And it's going to be some difficult conversations. I think another level of conversations we need to have about how we can engage our kids is reward wisdom.
Yeah. Amen.
Reward wisdom, don't reward foolishness. So what's an example of reward wisdom? Tell your kids, if you save for retirement, put money into a 529 plan, put money into a Roth IRA, or maybe even put money towards a down payment for a home, I'll match dollar for dollar up to, put a cap, $1,000 or whatever you can afford in your budget as the parent. This rewards wisdom. This rewards their sacrifice and their developing habits, which will pay dividends for the rest of their lives. Reward wisdom. If you don't save, I'm not going to bless you. If you don't demonstrate wisdom, I'm not going to bless you. But you demonstrate that wisdom. You show me that you understand the importance of this. I'm going to bend over backwards to help you. Again, I know not every family can do this, but to the extent possible, that's another way I would approach college-age kids or kids out of college now living in your home, or even kids who are on their own, maybe married, maybe have kids of their own. There are still ways that we can financially parent them to call them into wisdom, to call them into setting up those habits, which will set them in a good direction for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's so good. I think to sum up a lot of what you said, find the balance or find that boundary between enabling and helping.
Yeah, that's hard.
I think that's the big one right there. Like, for example, Tim, like you mentioned, like my situation, and just for context, my wife and I, we got married in our early mid-20s and we moved out. We had our own apartment and we had a kid and we loved it, but we were like, we really want to buy a house. And my mom and my dad, they got financial gifts from their parents to buy a house. And that's not something that we were able to receive. But my mom came up to me one day and was like, listen, I can't write you a check, but I can give you a place to live pretty cheap, so that you can save that on your own. And I said, let me think about it, and talked it over with my wife, and the stars aligned, personalities made sense. And we're doing that with a very specific timeline and a very specific goal with a lot of aggressiveness to make that happen.
Yes.
Now, if I had a different personality where I wasn't driven, or I, wasn't really pushing forward on any certain goal, I don't think she would have offered, and that probably would have been a good thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it all comes down to personality. How are your kids wired? Do you get along? I think there's a lot of things to that equation that you need to explore and examine to make sure that it makes sense to be really invested in their financial lives. One final thing before we move on: unsolicited advice could rub them the wrong way. So,
good call.
Because your 21-year-old knows how everything works, right? And all the parents out there just chuckled, yeah, my kid knows everything. But if they ask for advice, really lean in and give it to them. If they don't, they might fight you against it. They might fight it. So just read your child and make sure that you know how to operate, which I'm sure you do.
The topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investing and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA and SIPC.